Welcome to the RIA podcast. This is your host, Seth Green. Today, I have the good fortune to be joined by Bob Oros, Chairman and CEO of Hightower, a national wealth management firm that invests in and empowers financial advisory businesses to drive growth and help clients achieve wealth rebalanced. Bob, thanks so much for joining us.
Seth, my pleasure. Thank you.
It is our pleasure. Bob, you've had a long career in the financial services industry. Let's go back in time just a little. How'd you get started?
Honestly, I think I got started when my mom took me to meet with her financial advisor. And I was in college at the time. And I remember being just struck by going into the offices and the tickers running, if you remember back in those days. And then we sat down and he presented my mom a brown leather financial plan. And I remember just thinking how interesting I found it. And I was a finance major in college. I hadn't fully figured out what I wanted to do, with that degree. But in that moment, I thought the idea of serving clients in a really holistic way and talking about not just investments, but insurance and estate planning. I just thought it all sounded really interesting.
So that's awesome. I love how you fell into the business. What was the first, when did you just make the decision, hey, I'm going to become a financial advisor? And what was that first firm you worked at?
Well, the irony of all of this is I run one of the largest registered investment advisory firms, and I've never been an advisor. So I went from that moment of being really enamored to then coming out of college and interviewing for a bunch of financial planning jobs that were really sales jobs. And I won't name the companies because it doesn't matter. But when they tell you come back for your second interview and bring the names of 50 people you can
The dream, yep, do the 300, yep.
And so at that point I sort of became disillusioned because I wasn't someone who wanted to go sell to my friends and family. I really was caught up in the notion of advice, not selling products. And a lot of the financial planning jobs back then were really product sales in disguise, mutual funds, insurance products. So, ironically, I got away from it. I ended up getting into banking and then going into software and didn't really get reacquainted with the industry until I was much further into my career, call it, 22, 23 years ago, where I had been working at Charles Schwab and I took a role in their advisor business and started working with RIAs and started seeing the great work that these firms do on behalf of their clients. And, back in those days, a $200 or $300 million RIA was a large RIA. I mean, $1 billion RIA, we were actually throwing big parties for. There was just so few of them. So it's sort of amazing to see how the industry itself has matured, where, we now have probably not quite 1,000, but probably not far off of $1,000 billion RIAs. And now you've got, tens, 20s, 50s, hundreds, or a firm like ours, which is 200. So never been an advisor, but been acquainted with working in the industry for a long time.
Awesome. How did you go from that role at Schwab to the role you have now in Hightower?
Yeah, so I recognized at that point, I really enjoyed the industry and wanted to stay around advice. But at the same time, I was, always a believer in adding tools to my toolkit and be willing to go out and get new and different experiences. So I joined a firm called LPL Financial and actually went there to work on M&A. And mainly because I thought, doing deals would be really interesting. My timing couldn't have been worse. So think of me joining LPL to do this in 2007, 2008. Not a good time to be involved with trying to deploy lots of capital while the markets were melting down. So ultimately, that didn't work the way I had expected. But I did a couple of other things at LPL, ended up at Fidelity Investments, where I ran the RIA division at Fidelity. So again, got to be back in a seat where I was working with, thousands of RIAs around the country. And I think at somewhere along that journey, I decided, I wanted to run one of these things. I wanted to get on the other side of it. I knew what it was to serve one, as a custodian, but I wanted to feel what it would be like to run one, and ended up, with a great opportunity to run both an RIA and a broker dealer called HD Vest. That was unique. We served advisors who were also tax professionals, and so I did that, and that ultimately led me to becoming CEO at Hightower. And coincidentally, Hightower was a large client of mine at Fidelity. So I knew the business, knew a bit of the players, knew the history, and as they say, the rest is history. So 6.5 years later, here I am.
Well, congratulations on all of that. I am sure the longer version of that story could probably fill a book somewhere if it hasn't already. Wow.
It hasn't yet, but never say never.
That's an excellent point. Well, I'd be happy to refer you to a publishing company. All right, so let's dive in. What do you think? What are some of the elements about Hightower that make you different?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's always made us different is we've tried to bring this combination of scale, being a national firm with significant scale, but at the same time freeing up advisors like to continue to be themselves. Excuse me. So we don't have one version of what Hightower looks like. We have multiple versions because it's really delivered in a boutique way through each of our affiliated teams. So single ADV, but over 140 affiliated teams around the country, some who use the Hightower name, some who use a sub-branding of Hightower, and some who don't brand at all to the firm, but everybody is on our ADV. So Hightower is the advisor of record. And so what we're bringing is scale in those areas that most RAs don't have it. So think about HR, finance, compliance, technology. And then we're adding to it capabilities that most advisors wouldn't build on their own. So we have a national trust company. That's, Hightower's national trust company. We have a centralized investment team. We have a CPA firm, so we can do in-house taxes. So like those capabilities, and it's really up to the advisor as the fiduciary to decide, how do I want to curate the solution that works for my clients? And I think that's what makes us different is we're not trying to come in and take over. We're trying to come in and add to. So I always say, like, when we, add an RIA through a transaction, we want it to be 1 + 1 = 5. Like, this should really be a catalytic event to help the RIA become even better.
That makes a lot of sense, and you've obviously done it quite successfully. What have been some of the most important lessons you've learned over the last 6 years in your role as CEO of such a large organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of these things you could have never had in a playbook. Like, I never expected to lead a firm through a pandemic. That taught us a whole bunch of lessons around constructing a firm, that was really resilient and had the adaptability to be able to go to a very different model at big scale overnight. But I think we do a lot of M&A. It's one of our core strategies. We've done over 50 transactions during my time here. I think it's 54 at this point. And I think one of the big lessons is if you're going to do M&A, you have to do it as a core competency. It can't be a hobby. It can't be something that's like part of somebody's job to work on it, because the stakes are too high. And then you also have to have an incredible discipline around the word no. Like, do not get caught up and do not fall in love with the deal itself. Like, be really, really crisp on what's a fit and what isn't. Because at the end of the day, if you do a deal and it's not a fit, everybody pays the price. The clients probably pay the price. The advisor certainly pays the price, their employees, and the buyer. So having really good discipline to say, you know what, I don't care how big it is. I don't care about this or that, but like, it either fits or it doesn't. If it doesn't, that's okay. There's always another one. And then the other lesson is you've got to be able to take size and really turn it into scale, which means continually looking at what we do and how we do it. Because, every year or two, we're becoming a different firm. And, frame of reference, when I joined, we were probably about 50 billion in AUM, which is big. Today we're 200. Like those are two very different things. Just the number of employees, the amount of complexity, the amount of volume. So like we continually have to reinvent ourselves to make sure we're staying ahead of it.
How do you manage for that type of growth?
You know, you try like heck. You hope you get it right more than you get it wrong, but you occasionally stub your toe. You know, no matter how much we talk about staying ahead of the growth, it's just not something that most people have experienced a lot in their lives. And I say that as a badge of honor, Seth. I mean, I talked to our organization about it. Like, this is really unique to be at a firm at a time where it's on the hockey stick, and it's exciting and it's fun and it's challenging, but it's also not for everybody. So, you know, one of the things you have to do is you got to assemble the right team who really thrives in that type of environment. Because, you know, I think most people are probably more geared to incremental, because it's just easier to like wrap your head around like, hey, I'm going to grow by 5%. But growing by 30% or 50% or like, it's just a different animal. So we talk about it a lot. We have a lot of process around it so that, you know, we govern it properly. But then we recognize sometimes we're, you know, as much as we try, we won't keep up with it. But when we realize that, we then strive to jump ahead of it again.
How you mentioned something, you mentioned the idea of continually reinventing yourself. How do you decide what to reinvent?
Well, I think it's a combination of continually being students of the industry and watching, you know, what others are doing and learning from others. Then it's mostly keenly listening to our advisors, because they will tell you what's working and what's not, and usually with very direct candor, which we appreciate. So, you know, we try to set up numerous mechanisms to hear from the advisors directly, like what's getting in their way. Because the more friction we put into the system, the more it inhibits their ability to do the things we think are highest and best use: serve clients and find new clients. Like serve clients, find new clients. Like if you can free up advisors to spend the majority of their time doing that, everybody's going to win. When they're spending their time doing administrative stuff, doing operational stuff because it's inefficient, that's where we have to make sure we're stepping in and reinventing.
You have, for the holy grail, the most advisors would say, is bringing new business in the door, and you've got some unique abilities to help them do that. Can you talk a little bit about the marketing side of Hightower?
Yeah, so we've evolved quite a bit here, because, you know, historically our strategy was, if we're doing an acquisition, make sure we're acquiring an RIA that's got good proven growth. And everybody has their own version of how they do it. Some do it through big public personalities, through writing books. Others do it through very specific niches they serve. Some of them do it through very distinct referral programs. And that has worked. And we've had a great same store sales organic growth business as a result. But increasingly, we've seen organic growth being more difficult over the last few years. And so we've always had a marketing team that helps provide marketing services, almost like a full in-house agency, to our advisors, ranging from helping you craft your unique value proposition to website development to helping you run campaigns. Where we started to evolve further is like, how can we get more involved using our scale to drive activities? And so, you know, one of the things we've successfully rolled out is you know, in the old days, we'd call it a seminar approach. These days, we call it, you know, prospecting events, but they're really turnkey. So we're using new school methods combined with some old school tactics to go back to something that worked for most advisors in building their businesses. So these you know, events are really using data science to identify best fit people to invite, being really clear using data science on how far will people travel to come to an event based on time of day. So that's sort of like the new tactics that in the old day, we just wouldn't have access to that kind of intelligence. But then we're combining it with an old, you know, tactic of direct mail, and people still open mail. people open mail with their name on it. Because guess what? We don't get nearly as much mail as we get email, at least for most. So we're doing direct invitations, and we are successfully filling the room. People are showing up. These are people with real wealth. This isn't, people that are hoping to have wealth one day. And then there are a handful of topics that people find interesting, and it's a little bit of rinse and repeat. So, for Hightower, the challenge when we do anything from a central standpoint is we have to be able to do it at massive scale. Because like doing 10 events might sound like a lot to an individual RIA in a given city. We're going to do 140 events in the first half of this year. And if they continue to work, we'll try to do 300 or 400 this year. So like we're thinking about this at a very different scale. But we think it's a winning strategy. It's proving to be very successful, and it's a nice complement to what our advisors are already doing on their own.
That's awesome. With all the success you've achieved, you mentioned the growth of Hightower. What's your biggest challenge now?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is we talked a little bit about it. Like you got to keep up with the growth. With growth of people, becomes a different set of needs you need to be able to satisfy. So we're almost 2,000 employees now. So that includes all of our advisor teams, our corporate teams. So you've got to have like real career pathing. You've got to have like real systems around that type of stuff. So making sure we're continuing to like create that combination of big enough to matter, but still nimble enough to get stuff done, and still entrepreneurial, yet having some institutional frameworks where we need them. And the challenge is like, how do you keep that right balance so we still feel entrepreneurial? Like we don't want to feel like the big company. So that's a day-to-day thing for us, and a lot of it comes back to communication. So are we going to communicate like a small nimble company, or are we going to communicate like a big institution? And we're trying to create that more nimble approach to it.
Who is a good fit for Hightower?
Yeah, I think a good fit as an advisor is someone who's like hyper focused on client experience, keeping clients. Because one thing we're very proud of is, we have had right around 1% attrition over the last few years. So, the reality in these businesses is you lose clients. We're losing very few clients. It's because we have great advisors who are focused on them. So we want advisors that are very focused on client experience, keeping their clients, serving their clients, but then also have a growth mindset. And that means not just like growth of bringing in new clients, but also like growing their team, investing in talent, leveraging technology, showing adaptability. And most of all, they have to want to be a part of a team, because this is sort of a decision of like running your own thing to now being part of something bigger, where you get to take advantage, you still get some freedoms, but you got to want partnership, and you got to want to leverage that. So when we find that, those are the opportunities we really lean into.
Your passion is obvious. What do you like best about what you're doing?
By far the people and what we stand for. Like I just have the fact I've never been an advisor, I think gives me envy of the work our advisors do for their clients. I just have such great admiration. It's a word I've long used, but I mean it. I just admire what our advisors do. Like they're so good, they're thoughtful, they're caring. I mean, it's always client first, and that creates great outcomes for families that could look like anything from putting kids through college to paying for a daughter's wedding to allowing somebody to retire when they want to retire, allowing people to create legacy, to engage in philanthropy. And like I've told my own kids, like I'm really proud of our profession. And yes, are there some bad actors? Do we read the story? Sure. There are so few of those compared to the great work advisors do across the industry. That's what I love.
That's awesome. For our folks who are watching and listening and want to learn more, where is the best place for them to go to learn more about all things Bob and Hightower?
Well, you can just start with our website, hightoweradvisors.com.
All right. Well, we know your time has been incredibly valuable. We greatly appreciate you spending some of it with us. This has been Seth Green for the RIA show with Bob Oros from Hightower. Bob, thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, Seth. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks everybody for watching or listening. We will talk to you or see you next time.